Evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 12 of the Third and Short Overtime. This week, obviously, I'm joined by me, of course, and the rest of the gang, Mark, Bones, and John. And this week, we are going to dissect. We've got a handful of coaches that are on the hot seat. Rightly, wrongly, we're going to go into each one, and then at the end of the episode, we're going to look at the week one preseason games. I think it's only right that we mention a few teams that didn't impress, a few players that didn't impress, and obviously some that did impress. So, yeah, like I say, we'll start off with the head coaches on the hot seat, and I think if you're a big fan of NFL, if you're new, there's always dramas through the season where people will get sacked. I can't remember a season where there wasn't a dismissal, even if it's at the end of the season. They let them leave out till the end and just get rid of and start fresh, or even halfway through the season or whenever. But there's a few that we've got on the list. I think some definitely rightfully, a couple, on my opinion, a couple on the fence with, not too sure. I think it's a bit harsh, but we're going to go through on the bookmakers odds. So we're going to start with one of the favourite. There's the Denver Broncos, Vic Fangio. This is going to be his third year at the Broncos. I think his first year was 7. I've got it written here. 2019, a 7-9 record. Then 2020, it dropped off to 5-11. Obviously they had a few injuries on the roster last season, like some Sutton and things like that, and obviously the quarterback issue. But I'll go to Mark first, and I'll say, what after 3 seasons, why is Vic Fangio the favourite? Is it the new management upstairs that is not their guy, or is how much is John Elway to blame? What do you think it is with Vic Fangio? Why has he found himself after the 3rd season as the favourite?
The NFL's a quarterback-driven league, and you either have one or you don't. Now, when you look at that Denver Broncos roster, and you have a look at the talent they've amassed, heaven help the AFC West or the AFC in general. You know what I mean? Though, if they find a quarterback, I think that what Fangio's done is he's built a really good team and he's built a really good defense. That team outside of the quarterback position is as stacked as any position, as any team in the NFL. The reason why he's on the hot seat is because he hasn't got a quarterback who can win him games. I still don't understand what they're saying, Drew Lock. I think that Fangio's success is ultimately chained to him, which is a little bit unfair because Fangio specialises on the defensive side of the ball, and of course Drew Lock is on the offensive side of the ball. But I think if Drew Lock doesn't perform this year, it means that Denver will probably have a losing record again, and it probably means that Fangio will get the chop. Before I move on to that, when we talk about sides of the ball, to give you an explanation, the Denver Broncos last year had a middle of the road defense. That is Fangio's side of the ball. And what I think you'd want to see from Fangio is you'd want to see him having a top 10 defense, given he's a defensive-minded head coach, and an offense somewhere in the middle of the pack. But at the minute, he's just not getting neither of that. And I can understand him being on the hot seat, if truth be told.
Yeah, it's like you said. You mentioned the defensive side coming from. I can't remember the backroom staff who are on now, but I think I read somewhere that 8 of these last 13 years, these defenses are in the top 5 and fewest points allowed. So obviously coming to the Denver Broncos, you're expecting him to get his defense right. And I look at the defense this year, and he's got playmakers and stuff. So yeah, it's a good point that you bring up there. What do you think, John? Vic Fangio?
Well, I'm a pretty big fan of Fangio as a coach. Certainly as a defensive coach, I think he's tremendous. His track record speaks for itself. But I do feel sorry for him in Denver because he has been kind of, as Mark says, he's kind of been let down. He doesn't have a quarterback. That's more to do with John Elway in front of him, who for some reason wants to draft quarterbacks that look exactly like him but don't play anything like him. You look at guys like Drew Lock, even going back to Osweiler, which is a good few years ago now. They've continually failed to put quarterback talent on that roster, other than when they signed Peyton Manning. I feel for Fangio, but it's hard to judge him as a head coach because, he hasn't got the team to kind of prove himself. It gets to the stage where, yeah, okay, he's not got a great record, but he hasn't got a quarterback. How can you judge him as a coach? We don't know what his team is. He hasn't had a solid team behind him. I think it's really hard to judge him as a coach, but unfortunately, being the fact that the GM changed in the offseason, I suspect he's going to want his own guy in the offseason. So I think, barring them going to the playoffs, which is possible, but I wouldn't exactly stick my house on it. If they don't go to the playoffs, I think he's out the door in the offseason.
Can I ask a question of you, John? Say if you were to put a middle of the road quarterback on this franchise, for example, I have Lock down the bottom level. Of all the starters in the NFL, I would have him ranked 31. I think only Taysom Hill or maybe Jameis Winston, whoever's starting in New Orleans, I would have as a 32nd ranked quarterback in the NFL. So if I've got Drew Lock ranked 31st, if we were to put a middle of the road quarterback, I'm thinking of somebody like Derek Carr. If we were to put Derek Carr, or if we were to put Kirk Cousins, or even if we were to put Matt Ryan on this roster, do you think that this Denver Broncos team and Vic, the way set that defense up and the way they've got talent across the roster, I think a middle of the road quarterback would be enough to put them in the playoffs, to be honest with you, John?
I think it would, because two of the guys you mentioned there, one was Cousins, I can't remember who the other one was. It wasn't Carr, but have both been to the playoffs with largely similar teams that have been set up for defense, and just basically need the quarterback not to cock it up. And yeah, Kirk Cousins on a team like that, somebody like that, yeah, I think they'd certainly be a contender. It's hard to get out of that division, of course, but I feel like they could get a wild card pretty easily. Yeah.
The reason why I asked, John, is because you've got an atypical middle of the road quarterback who's in your starting position at this moment in time, but maybe not pegged to start after week 6, as we talked last week.
Yeah.
But we're looking for trade candidates for Jimmy Garoppolo, and I know that they've brought in Teddy Bridgewater, and I know that they've brought in, well, obviously they've got Drew Lock. How much does Garoppolo move the needle? Well, let's face it, I think Garoppolo is a better quarterback than both Bridgewater and Lock. And he would put them in that 20th ranked quarterback range, which I predict would be enough to get this team over the hump. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Garoppolo's an interesting one because he has actually done exactly that. He's rode a great defense all the way to the Super Bowl, almost won it. So you think to yourself, if he goes into a team like Denver, and I do think that's possible, by the way. I think I mentioned them as a potential trade partner maybe a couple of episodes back, because there is an existing relationship between the Niners and the Broncos due to the fact that John Lynch is our GM and he was a Broncos player for many years. So I wouldn't be shocked at that, and I think it would make a big difference to them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know John Elway's moved to the side. He's still actually there, and there's George Payton that's coming. I just think what kind of season keeps Vic Fangio there? And Bones, obviously, if you've got an opinion on Vic Fangio, and also adds where do you think he can get to that will keep him in his job and keep him safe for this year and moving on to next?
Well, we know in this day and age that an NFL coach's lifespan is not a long one. You don't get many years. If you can't pull out an above 500 record in that time, then it's not looking good. I do think they need to go over 500 to really, for him to stand any chance of keeping a job. As it's been in the news / press recently, hasn't he, talking about the quarterback battle between Lock and Bridgewater is quite, it's neck and neck, and we could see Bridgewater have a revitalized time in this new Denver offense. So, yeah, I just think it's got to be over 500, right? Easily. I'm sure we all agree. He's got to at least have a winning record, if not a wild card spot, maybe.
Yeah, I must admit, I would surprise to see him as the favourite, but obviously he has got a lot on his plate up there, and like Mark mentioned, it's the quarterback for me. He just hasn't got it right. He's brought in Teddy Bridgewater this season, so he's got the players there, and this is the thing when I see some of these managers, some of these GMs, and I think not GM, sorry, head coaches. I just think, when you've got the players there, they look at it and think, how long can I keep this guy in charge when I'm wasting this talent on the roster before I need to move on and take advantage of that? And we'll get onto that a lot more with a few other players later on. So the next coach that we've got coming in at second lowest odds is Mike McCarthy at the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, Bones, it's on his second year. He went 6-10 last year. Losing Dak Prescott in week 5, where obviously it could have looked a lot better, and I think it probably would have done. Going into your second season after a 6-10 record, with obviously the defense that they had as well was terrible. How much of a factor is it that Jerry Jones is the GM, why he's second on the list?
I think the fact that it's the Cowboys is the only reason he's second on the list. To be going into your second year as a head coach and be on that list of people who are high odds to be fired is absolutely savage. But again, I said it, the last guy, NFL coaches' lifespans are brief. Apparently 2 years is short enough. I do think, in fairness to Mike McCarthy, he is more. We were talking about how Vic Fangio is a more defensively minded coach. Well, it's the reverse with Mike McCarthy. He's an offensive-minded coach whose number one quarterback went down last year. Like, they looked much better a football team before Dak Prescott got injured. Like, I think it's really cruel to judge him based on last year's season and say that because, like, I think even Jerry Jones will accept that if Dak goes down, it's going to be a rough season. Like, he loves that kid. Like, I don't know. I feel McCarthy's getting a short straw here, but I think you are also right that the fact that it's the Cowboys is a big factor in why he's on the list, why the odds are so high.
A bit like Denver. I think Mike McCarthy going to live or die by his quarterback. He's either going to stay in his job or not stay in his job with his quarterback. And it's quite a similar situation to Denver, apart from he has got a quarterback. Problem is the quarterback's got injury problems at the minute. Again, that roster's stacked. And I think when you have got so much talent on a roster, I think fans come in with high expectations. My main concern is with, like Dallas is, just how fit is Dak? Just how fit is Dak Prescott? He had that really terrible injury last year. That was devastating injury if we watched it. And I'm concerned because behind Dak Prescott on the depth chart, you've got nobody. You know what I mean? Or you've got Garrett Gilbert or someone like that. When we're talking about players who might be traded and stuff like that, Dallas, I think, have got a really sketchy depth chart behind Dak Prescott, and he's pulled up now with like a labrum, like injury or something like that, like a lateral injury, which isn't really akin to NFL players. From what all I've heard and everything I've written, it's more of a baseball pitcher's injury. You know what I mean? And that's got to be concerning because he obviously broke his ankle last year. He's had shoulders problems in the past. And now he's got this strained lat problem. I think Dallas might be active around roster cut down time, looking at finding a trusted backup to come in behind Prescott. Because that team is really stacked. And last year wasn't good enough. They got in Dan Quinn. This year, you've got to think should be better. But if Dak does suffer injuries, which does worry me this year, especially with these shoulders and lat injuries he's reporting, I think it's gonna be a tough season for Mike McCarthy. I think so much of it hinges on Dak being fit.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Mark. I think one thing that I took out of when I saw Mike McCarthy as second favourite to be on the hot seat, to get sacked. I just think they've had 10, 11, something like years of Jason Garrett before. I think they needed a season last year. Just it didn't have to be special or anything. It just needed something where you could get on board and go, look, we're moving in the right direction. And like we mentioned, Dak Prescott going down were a big thing, but it just wasn't that, was it? On the defense and stuff, it were a mess. Let's be honest. And there just nothing really happened that eased the worries of the Cowboys, fans and stuff. So I think it's a big year for him. So yeah, what are your thoughts, Mike, on Mike McCarthy, John?
I do wonder a couple of things. Well, number one, I'll agree with Bones' point. The idea that somebody's on a hot seat after one kind of average year with an injured quarterback is a little bit strange to me. But it's the way of the world in Dallas. That's kind of the way it goes. I think there's two questions for me that I don't really have answers to, and I think we're going to get answers to this year. how much difference does Dak Prescott make to that Dallas team? I suspect it's quite a bit. Is it enough? Because he's had good seasons in the past. How good is he? And then the follow-on point to that is how good is Mike McCarthy as a coach? Because in many ways he's been shielded because he's been at the Packers. He's had one of the best quarterbacks, possibly the best quarterback in the league for best part of a decade. They've come away with one Super Bowl. I'm not saying that they should be winning it every year, but it's just a surprise that they've only ever come away with one. And I don't think it was all McCarthy. I think obviously there's a lot that goes on in Green Bay. We all know that. There's a lot of issues there. But I do think there's questions about McCarthy. I'd be surprised if they get rid of him, only because where do you go after you fire a Super Bowl winning coach? What do you do next? It would have to be a young coordinator, but then if they're afforded the same lack of time to turn things around, then what's the point? I don't know. It's going to be an interesting one to watch there.
John, you made an excellent point there because you chose the point I was going to make. just how good is Mike McCarthy? Because let's face it, he was in a favourable position when he was in Green Bay. You had a generational quarterback there. You had good receiving corps. You had Randall Cobb, who was in his best prime. You had Jordy Nelson, who was doing well. You had Jones, who might have been there, or maybe even Devante Adams at the start of his career, whoever was that third wide receiver. And I think when you land on those kind of rosters, like and you're in a franchise which has got a superstar quarterback, like, Dak Prescott, like Aaron Rodgers at the time, how much of that was actually Mike McCarthy and how much of it was Aaron Rodgers? I guess this is a question that people sometimes asking now that Tom Brady's moved on, like in Belichick, you know what I mean? Was it Tom Brady? Was it Belichick? Because I think it was a bit more of a 50-50 split. But I'm not convinced with how good Mike McCarthy actually is. And the other point I want to make is, and I'm going to go back to it, when you've got talent, you've got pressure. Because that team has got talent spread about it. It's probably got the best 3 wide receiver stable for one franchise in the NFL. In CeeDee Lamb, Gallup, and Cooper. When you throw the tight end in, Jarwin or Schultz, and Zeke in the backfield, and Dak if fit, and he's an offensive-minded coach. That's a phenomenal array of weapons that he's got. And if you can't push them into the playoffs this year, I think you should rightly be on the hot seat. I know that you think 2 years isn't enough. I think when you've got that kind of talent and it's on your side of the ball, it's he's an offensive-minded coach. It's on his side of the ball. You have to deliver with it. You've just got to.
Yeah, I think looking, especially at the NFC East, that getting to the playoffs and just winning that division's winnable. So if Dallas Cowboys, if Dak Prescott stays fit and Dallas Cowboys are on the top of that division at the end of the year, I think there'll be big problems down there for Mike McCarthy. So the third favourite, we're moving on to the third and short overtime's favourite guy, Cliff Kingsbury. We'll try and keep it a minimum, but you know how much we love him over here. 2019 started with a 5-10-1 record. Last year started with an 8-8 record after a 5-2 start, and it just imploded down the back end. I could go to anyone here, but I'm going to go with John because I know how much he really loves Cliff Kingsbury. Why is Cliff Kingsbury on the hot seat?
Well, I think Cliff Kingsbury has become something of a third and short meme because we seem to somehow mention him on every episode, even when it's got nothing to do with the Cardinals. And I think I probably started that one, so I'll take responsibility. Excuse me. It's an odd one with Kingsbury. Like, I don't really know how he became an NFL head coach in the first place. The guy was a failed college coach. He'd just taken an OC job at USC, and then suddenly the Cardinals hired him. And it's all a bit bizarre. Arizona as a whole, I keep hearing how good the team is. Every year it feels like they've got some potential. They've obviously got a really good quarterback in there. But you're not seeing the development of an elite team. You're not seeing something, you're not seeing a team get better. You're seeing a team kind of just tread water. And in that division, if you're treading water, it's easy to come bottom of that division. The only reason they didn't last year is because we basically ran out of players at some point. And even then, we still beat them towards the end of the season. I think it's one of those situations where, and I think if it does happen, it's going to be a house cleaning because I think the GM will go as well. I think it's going to be one of those situations where somebody takes a look at it higher up and goes, hang on, we've got all this talent. We've drafted high pretty consistently. We've drafted good players. I don't think they've drafted a dud recently. They've drafted a lot of good players, and we aren't seeing the results. We haven't had a playoff appearance. We don't look close to getting in it. So, yeah, I think he would be the most likely to go, because I think in that division, if you're not contending, the owners are going to find a way to put them in contention. So, yeah, I mention him every week for a reason. I think he's definitely number one on the hot seat in my eyes.
I've mentioned this a few times already, and I can't stress this enough. As a head coach, you've got to at least keep your side of the play correct. So, like Mike McCarthy, I'm different to Fangio. Kingsbury is an offensive-minded coach. He was brought into a situation where they were picking number one in the draft, and he got to pick his tailor-made quarterback for his system. That doesn't happen very often. We've got Urban Meyer, who's doing it this year with Trevor Lawrence, but he got to pick his tail. He was brought in to work with Kyler Murray. He was brought in to make Kyler Murray successful. And to some extent, Kyler Murray's been brilliant. I'm a fan of Kyler Murray. I think he's got a little bit further to go, but we've already seen how electric he is and what a playmaker he is with his arm and with his legs. The problem I have now is just how stagnant that offense looked in the back end of the season. I think once teams had figured out Kyler Murray, there seemed to be like no plan B. They were actually decent offense last year. They were ranked 6th in the NFL in total yards. Do you know what was not good about that offense? Their total points that they scored. They considered the 6th ranked total yards offense. They were only the 13th ranked total points offense. So already we're starting to see what's happening there. And I think when you look at it as well, Kyler Murray accounted for so many touchdowns in that team last year. There was a lot put on the shoulders of Kyler Murray. And one way of getting your 5'10" quarterback killed is by calling running plays frequently for him, because you can't scheme up anything else when the pressure's on. This roster's got weapons on. They signed AJ Green, who I believe will help them in the red zone. They've got Rondale Moore, who was terrific in the first preseason game. And everybody knows my love for Rondale Moore. And of course, they've got Hopkins. I don't think that they've got a steady running game, although I'm pretty high on Chase Edmonds. And I just think, I think that Kingsbury's going to go. I can't see them getting into the playoffs in the NFC West. I think at best, they're the third best team in that division. Now, will 3 teams from that division go into the playoffs? I don't think so, because you're all going to take games and wins off each other in that division. It's competitive. And I think he's gone. I think he'll probably be the first one that goes. He would be my favourite. I just don't rate him. I don't think he's come in, and I don't think he's delivered. I would say his seat isn't just hot. His seat is scalding. It's leaving burns. It's taking your skin off. That's how hot his seat is,
So as a quick one before we do move on, though, would you say then Kingsbury is your favourite as the first mid-season fire? Do you reckon he'll be the one to go in the middle of because we see it every year. Someone goes in the middle of the year. Do you think it's Kingsbury?
I do. I really do. I think Kingsbury's the one that's going to go in the middle of the year. I can see they're very, very. They're in a very, very, unfavourable division for one. The NFC West is particularly stacked. And I can see them losing a run of games, and I can see Kingsbury being gone, before the season ends. I think he would be the one that's going to go in the middle of the year.
I won't forget that third best in the NFC West comment, Mark. I'll remember that one, don't worry. Cliff Kingsbury. I think you both touched on it. I think the players he's brought in, in free agency and trades, looks like he's made a lot of them, and he's just not got what he wants out of these players. And like you said, you've got Kyler Murray, they've got Hopkins over, they've got some good players over there. It's like they brought JJ Watt over, and I don't think he's even got on the practice field yet. I think he's out of an injury. Isn't he? It's little things like that adds up. And when you haven't had a winning record yet, I know it's granted only 2 years. I didn't really. Mark knows the college side more than me, but I didn't really see a lot from him in college to to say that he would make it in the NFL anyway. To be honest with you, I don't know what your thoughts are that, Mark.
He was a bit of an enigma. Patrick Mahomes was obviously, like his shining light at Texas Tech. But let's forget, they had Patrick Mahomes and had a really bad record as well. You know what I mean? So he wasn't really a winning college coach. Although he was a young, inventive brain. And we made note of this a couple of months back, and a couple of weeks back, even in another pod. I think what Steve Keim, who was the general manager in Arizona, did is he saw the Rams go get their young head coach in McVay. He saw Shanahan, another young head coach, end up in the 49ers. And he went, I want my head coach. And he went into the college game. And he did get somebody who was inventive in college football. But it just hasn't transferred to the NFL. His offense is too dink and dunk, which is alarming because in college it was air raid. It was spread out and it was fast-paced and it was bombs away. So it's like, I don't think he's really brought anything what they wanted from the college game, what they expected from the college game into Arizona.
Yeah, I think most of us agree with all the points we made on Cliff Kingsbury, and we'll leave it there. Like John said, we could really dig deep on this guy. And I don't know if that's fair. It feels like it becomes an agenda against Cliff Kingsbury this podcast. So we'll move on to a guy that is the fourth favorite that's on the hot seat, and I'm on the fence with me. I'm probably favourite where I think it's a bit harsh to be honest with you. It's Matt Nagy at the Chicago Bears. He's gone into his fourth year as well. In his first year, he had a 12-4 record, and then he's had two middle of the road 8-8 records. I think he's been to the playoffs twice and lost both wild cards, I believe, if I remember rightly. Obviously, we came in when Trubisky were there, and now it's a post-Trubisky era. I'm just thinking, does Matt Nagy get more than 1 year, Bones, or is he right to be on the hot seat?
Matt Nagy gets more than 1 year, 100%. I think he came in to a situation where it wasn't his guy drafted, realistic. I don't think Trubisky was his guy, and Trubisky sucks. I'm not even a Bears fan, but I do think Nagy deserves more than 1 year. I think it's tough in Chicago as a head coach. I think Chicago have had one of the best head coaches of all time ever be a Bears head coach. We had George Halas, and they also had Mike Ditka. So they had two Hall of Fame caliber head coaches during their history, and they've just not recaptured that since Ditka, have they? And I think that's what Bears fans wish would happen. And I think eventually, I do think with Fields, I think Fields is definitely his guy. I think that's going to be the difference maker here. And I think once we see this new quarterback era for the Bears, I think it's going to completely change the look of the Bears. And I don't think Nagy's in that much danger. I'm surprised he's so high up on the odds, to be honest.
I share that sentiment with you, Bones. I would also say I don't think Nagy's in danger. Do you know what kills young quarterbacks? A lack of continuity. Having to learn offense after new offense after new offense. We saw this with Alex Smith to some extent in his early days at San Francisco. And also a little bit with Derek Carr as well, may I add. You know what I mean? There's nothing that will kill a young, promising quarterback's career more than a lack of continuity. And I think the fact that they have now got Justin Fields, I think will give Nagy another season at least in this, because they'll want to see Nagy develop him. I don't think he's done too badly there, if truth be told. I think you're right. Trubisky was never his guy, and Trubisky was there before Nagy anyway, wasn't he? He kind of went into that situation, and Trubisky was already there. And I think he was in a bit of the fact that he was able to get the playoffs with Mitch Trubisky kind of speaks to me how good I think this guy is as a coach. And the fact now he's got Justin Fields, I think the Bears won't want to rock it up. They'll want to give 2 years of Nagy with Fields because, a lack of continuity, a lack of consistency, learning an offensive playbook and being expected to come back and learn a brand new one will absolutely kill the early portion of a young quarterback's career.
Yeah, I think a lot of it does revolve around Trubisky, and I just think that, like you said there, Mark, he did so well to get him to the playoffs a couple of times. Did they expect too much Nagy, did they expect miracles when it came to Trubisky? You know, because with such a high draft pick as well, did they expect that he would get the best out of him and this would be the franchise quarterback for some time? And when that didn't happen, was that put on Nagy for some strange reason? Even though, like you mentioned, it wasn't his guy. What do you think on the matter, John? Are you on board with us thinking it seems a bit harsh? How high it is?
Pretty much. One thing I'll say straight off, that draft, Trubisky second pick, Solomon Thomas third pick. Talk about two bad back-to-back picks, Jesus. But as far as Nagy goes, I think he's a good coach. I don't know where this on the hot seat stuff with him, and it is out there. I don't really understand where it's come from. Obviously, they've not been a success. The problem with the Bears, they've got as Bones alluded to, and also he said as well, they have this idea that they should be challenging every year, and it's sunk a few head coaches there. Really, it would be a shame if it took him, because I actually think he's a pretty good coach. The main thing that I look at is he keeps saying he's going to start Andy Dalton, and if he does that, I think he's signing his own death warrant. I know he probably has to say that to some extent. This is what coaches do. We hear this bullshit every offseason, don't we? Like, oh, well, I'm only going to put him in when he gives us the best chance to win. But he's a fool if he doesn't, because it'll buy him 2 years, as Marcus said, as Bones has said. If he puts Fields in and there's some sign of life, which based on the early returns, the very early returns, I think there would be, he's going to buy himself 2 years. If he doesn't do it, I don't know what he's playing at, to be honest with you. I think he must want out, but...
Do you know who I think is on the hot seat in Chicago? It shouldn't be Nagy. It should be Ryan Pace, the GM. Ryan Pace did pick Trubisky. He was there before, he got there. And if anybody should be on the hot seat, it should be him, Ryan Pace. I think what we see sometimes in the NFL, though, is we do see franchises clearing house. But I just can't see it happening. I think even if Pace was to go, I still think Nagy would be safe because we've got Fields.
Yeah, Matt Nagy. I think we've all agreed on the agreement there that he'll definitely have another couple of years, especially with the new quarterback. He's got his guy in there now, Justin Fields. And I think, like you say, I think he has to say that he's going to start. Not going to start Justin Fields week 1, but. We'll find out. I think we'll get onto that later with Justin Fields. I won't spoil that too much because we're going to talk about the rookies after the week 1. Moving on to number 5, which I thought would be, even though he's only going into his 3rd season, I thought it'd be a little bit higher, especially above Matt Nagy. Is Zach Taylor, Cincinnati Bengals, like I mentioned, going into his 3rd year. His first year of 2-14. Didn't get much better in 2020, 4-11-1. This is obviously Burrows went down injured, but there's a lot of stuff there that I know how much Bones likes this guy. I'm not going to go drill too much into him. Go on, Bones, take it away on Zach Taylor. Why is this guy only number 5? Should he be higher?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. I've never done that before. Have I said something about Zach Taylor that at some point that's made it seem like other than the fact that this guy is statistically the worst coach in Bengals history? Kieran, if he watches this podcast, is going to love me now. Like, statistically, this is the worst head coach in Bengals history. And, all right, yeah, Burrows went down injured last year. Okay, fine. But, the fact that you then didn't really invest in an offensive line draft pick is going to really highlight that this year. And if this wide receiver demand from Burrows, or supposedly what it was, doesn't work out, doesn't pan out like it's supposed to, then I don't see how he stays in the job another year. No, 6-25, 6-25. I don't know. That's bad. That's really bad. No excuses with 6-25. Even with a backup roster, you can get more sympathy wins than that.
Yeah, I think obviously just Jamar Chase this year in the draft, big first round, he's got himself a target for Joe Burrow. I think I don't like looking at it as well. Cincinnati are quite laid back normally with their coaches over there and stuff, I feel. And I don't really think he has to improve that much, really. I know he's probably set that bar himself, to be honest with you, but no one's expecting Cincinnati to get to the playoffs this year, but they're expecting some improvement and then obviously they've got some good players there. They're expecting some improvement, and then just some steps to show that this guy is worth a manager's spot. You know, in the NFL, you know, there's a lot of there's a lot of like managers in college and stuff that would love to have this chance. I just think that Zac Taylor's a bit he just doesn't excite me. Like, I'm not a Cincinnati fan, so other people might say differently, but I just don't see anything there from him. What's your opinion on him, John?
I think there's a few things at play here. First of all, you can't argue with that record. Normally, you say that about someone good, but in this case, it is a terrible record. But it was a terrible team he inherited as well. I think that's the first thing. You're right about Cincinnati. They are quite patient with the coach. Obviously, Marvin Lewis was there for years. But the flip side to it, it's really hard to succeed in Cincinnati. The money's not really there for free agents. They don't really have a massive scouting staff. They're known for being behind the rest of the league in a lot of cases. It's hard to succeed. But having said that, if you're being brought in, as he was, he was the quarterback coach of the Rams, and he's being brought in. It was that time. It was that era where anybody that had ever spoke to Sean McVay in a lift was getting a head coaching interview. But you're being brought in to manufacture offense, and he hasn't been able to do that. Burrow was out. He's a top player, and I get that. And anytime you lose your starting QB, you're going to struggle. Like, there's no two ways about that. But even some of the better coaches in the league have been able to manufacture offense with bad quarterbacks or mediocre quarterbacks. Taylor hasn't been able to do that. I do agree, though, if he has even a slight improvement this year, if they're up to like 6-7 wins, I think he's probably safe for another year. They don't like going on coaching searches. Do I think they'll get that? Kind of depends if Burrow survives the season. They don't seem to want to protect him. It's almost criminal negligence, if you ask me, but that's the way it goes, isn't it?
You know why I think the Bengals struggle? And I don't necessarily think it's on the offensive side of the ball. I think they suffer badly on the defensive side of the ball. Go on, here's a quick pop quiz. Anybody can name the defensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals without Googling? No, of course you fucking can't. Of course you can't, because no fucker can. Even I had to Google. It's Lou Arumo. Lou Arumo is the defensive coordinator of that Bengals team. Lou Arumo was, he's famous, I suppose, if anything. His only real defensive coordinator experience was with the Miami Dolphins in 2015. And that was an interim defensive coordinator. He's been a defensive backs coach around the league with Miami and with New York. But yeah, I remember when Zac Taylor was appointed the head coach, it took them ages to find a defensive coordinator. Jack Del Rio turned them down, and eventually they landed on Lou Anarumo, however you want to pronounce it. Like, you know what I mean? I'm a Geordie. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. But, until they get that side of the ball correct, until they start playing better on defense, despite the fact that they're another team with potentially, at least on paper, 3 very good wide receivers in Boyd in the slot, Jamar Chase, who hasn't played football since 2019, so he's going to be rusty, and T. Higgins, who I think is just fantastic. I loved T. Higgins. You know what I mean? I think he's just a brilliant player, and I think he's going to be very promising for that team. I wouldn't be surprised if he leads Cincinnati in receiving yards next year, to be honest with you. More so because Chase hasn't played since 2019. But yeah, I just don't think that team, I don't think Zac Taylor's got a very good coaching back team around him. You know what I mean? He's got Brian Callahan as offensive coordinator, who's young, 37-year-old. Yeah, he was at the Raiders for a while. It's a quarterbacks coach. I remember him being at the Raiders. And then he went to Cincinnati as the offensive coordinator. I mean, he's a young coach. But yeah, I think you could probably do with a better backroom staff, Zac Taylor. I don't think that record is necessarily all on his shoulders. I'm sorry, Bones. But I do think that sometimes you have to get some help. And I think, like John said, you'll not have to move the needle much to be safe.
Tell you what might be interesting, and this is a very, very early off-season prediction. If Zac Taylor was to go, Joe Brady's out there. He had some good times with Burrow. If he has a good season with the Panthers, that strikes me as a hire they would make. They've already drafted Chase largely, allegedly, because Burrow wanted him. Do they go down that route? That would be an interesting combination to see in the NFL. Obviously, we know what it's done in the past.
I like the idea of Joe Brady ending up in Arizona, to be honest with you. Like if they want a young coach, go get Joe Brady. And the idea of Kyler Murray and Joe Brady has me playing soggy biscuit. You know what I mean? So Joe Brady, everyone knows my love for Joe Brady after that just absolutely terrific season with LSU. But I really hope that he ends up in Arizona with Kyler Murray, Rondale Moore, Devonta Hopkins. I would be a little bit upset if he landed up in Cincinnati, although it is very obvious,
Yeah, I must admit, I had Zach Taylor higher, but also I don't think he has to improve that much, to like keep his job safe for another year. But I also don't think that he can manage it, to be honest with you. I look at the division they're in, and I just see that they're not getting many wins from in there. But we'll see. But yeah, I think that Zach Taylor could be gone by the end of the season or before. The next guy we're moving on to is Mike Zimmer, the Minnesota Vikings. The only guy that's had more than 3 seasons out of this bunch that we've done so far. Everyone's had 3 seasons or less that we've talked about. Mike Zimmer's had, I can't remember how many it is now. He's like, is it 8 or 9 seasons he's had at Vikings, something like that? Yeah, I think, and he's done all right there. And I think, obviously, the last 2 years have been quite mediocre. Like, especially since Kirk Cousins came in, I think, especially since then, because obviously he's taken them to a few playoffs. I think he took them to the championship 1 year, if I remember rightly. The NFC side. Yeah, what do you think, Mark? Is it the last 3 years that have putting nails in his coffin?
Joe, I like Mike Zimmer, and I think there's a lot of people who respect Mike Zimmer in the NFL, and there's a few reasons why I would say I think he is in the hot seat. One, he has been there 7 years. You know what I mean? And I think at some point, franchises think, if he was to have another loser record this year, they might think, have we seen Zimmer peaked? Is it stale now? Do we have to go in a new direction? The second one is not his fault, but he's 65 years of age. As we're seeing the NFL move to this youth movement in head coaching, which I think we probably saw arguably with Raheem Morris and Mike Tomlin when they were hired back from the Tampa staff as head coaches. We've seen young head coaches coming in, and it's a copycat league. Oh, try saying that. Copycat league. So will Minnesota go younger? He is 65. And the final thing I want to say as well is, he has had some playoff positions. He's been there this season 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This will be his 8th season going into the NFL. So he's had 7 seasons there already. He's had 3 playoff appearances. He's won 2 NFC North titles, which is difficult when you've got Aaron Rodgers in there, by the way. But the last one he won was in 2017. So even though they got the playoffs in 2019 with a 10-6 record, in San Francisco, John, your team beat them in the divisional game. They were only second in the NFC North that year. And of course, last year, 7-9. And I think if they were to have another 8 and 9 season, if they will have another 7 and 10 kind of season with the extra games tossed in, I think we can probably see Mike Zimmer be moved on from there, because I think his age and those factors count against him a little bit,
Yeah, I agree. It's a pity. I like Mike Zimmer, like you do. I think he's a good coach. I think he's well respected. I think more so than anything, though, it's just things going a bit stale in Minnesota. That team's been together a long time. Kirk Cousins has been there quite a long time now. I would say, based on his contract, he's probably going into his last year. I can see somebody at the top there going, right, okay, time to just reset, even if it does mean rebuilding. They got some cap issues to deal with as well. They got some people on bigger contracts. So I could definitely see a swap there. That said, playoff appearance probably saves him. I don't know whether they can do that as it stands right now, but I think they might be pressing the reset button in Minnesota at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think I'm same as you. I like Mike Zimmer. Some really good things over the years in Minnesota. Mark's mentioned it a few times, going back at a few. Like you look at the side of the ball that they're known for, and obviously the last 2 years on defense, I don't think they've been as good, the Vikings, and they've got some really good talent there as well, especially on offense. And I think they should be aiming for the playoffs. And even though we're Packers in the division, I still think they should be getting the playoffs with the players that they have. But have you got a point, Bones, on Mike Zimmer?
I think Zimmer's getting a tough rap to be this high up the list, to be honest, because I think. And I mean, even though he's the last one we're covering, really, like he's still quite high up to even be in the conversation, I guess. Because the last year was it was the COVID year. It's his first losing season whilst he's been there. Granted, he's not won the Super Bowl or the conference championship. Made the playoffs a few times. In the year they made it to the NFC Championship, they did lose to the Super Bowl winning Eagles, right? Like that. It's not like they lost to a nobody team. Do you know what I mean? Like they didn't just get knocked out of the playoffs by nobody. Like I don't know. It's a tough one because I get what you're saying. Like things are getting stale and they might want to change. But I also think his record isn't that bad. And I think last year's a tough year to judge it on when every other year he's had either a tying or winning season, basically. Like.
I know I'm going to come to you, Max. I know you wanted to bring Mike Zimmer into the conversation tonight, and I'm like you were saying, obviously a losing record last season. What keeps Mike Zimmer safe going next year? Is it playoff or nothing, or just missing out on the playoffs? Would he get another year, or is it getting to the playoffs and that's it? That's what we expect.
I think it's a return of the defense. They ranked 27th in defense last year, which really wasn't good enough. Now they missed Hunter, who's a terrific player. The edge who they really missed. They had a young secondary last year, who played a lot of football and might be better for it. I'm thinking Cameron Dantzler in particular, will be good in that system and did play some decent football in patches last year. They bought in Patrick Peterson, who's now got his best football behind him, but he's still an above average NFL cornerback. I think if Zimmer is to keep his job, you might return to a winning record. Let's face it, you take Green Bay out the equation, and when we were doing that, division, we said that the Bears were a good team. Detroit will be improved, but Minnesota can come second in that division, and I think that division could have a 2 playoff team. So I think coming second would be enough to be in the playoffs. But I think more than anything, you want to see that defense come back to where it was beforehand in the past. And I think to do that secondary's got to improve. The secondary's got to be better than it was last year.
Yeah. So that concludes the 6 people we had on the top of our list. Actually, the 6 that we picked up happened all to be the first 6 on the bookmakers. Mike Zimmer. I think Mike Zimmer ended it with 9-1 odds. Is there anyone else out there, a head coach, who is clinging on to the job that we haven't mentioned? Bones, have you got someone?
I think I do. You might disagree with me, but I think at least, if not this year, then next year, I think Joe Judge is in for it. Like, it's New York, so it's a ruthless city anyway. Like, the media is absolutely savage. You've just had a terrible fucking season, and your training camp had a massive fuck-off brawl in it. Like, I don't see how, if this doesn't get better, this guy keeps his job, because it is a rough job to keep. They go through coaches pretty quick. I think in the last 4 years, they've had 3 different head coaches or something. Like, you don't keep a job long in New York. I'm sorry. I do think Joe Judge is in the firing line at the very.
Well, personally, I can't imagine what Bones would possibly have against expatriates being head coaches. But that said, I actually think there's some validity in it. It's one of those, if the arse completely falls out of the Giants next season, then yeah, he's got to be in trouble, hasn't he, really? It could go either way. I honestly, he's at the moment, he's hitting all the greatest hits of the Belichick coaching tree, which is piss off as many of your players as possible and hope for the best. He could be the one that turns it around and starts for the games, but I think you have to say history's against him. I don't think he'll go this season because I think more likely Jason Garrett goes this season. If that offense is not doing anything, I think it's going to be one of those where it's like, right, get rid of your OC. I think the defensive coordinator will probably be all right. He was a hot name for head coaching last year. I can't remember his name now. Graham, Patrick Graham? Might have had that up. I'm not entirely sure, but he had a good season. The defense played pretty well. I think Garrett's the one under pressure there, but if it goes into year 3 with him having fired his OC, then yeah, I think we could be talking about him next year if indeed we're still doing turn short overtime then as being maybe top of the hot seat list.
Something just doesn't smell right at the Giants for me. There's just some. I don't rate Daniel Jones. I don't buy anything about Daniel Jones. I think he's a bottom level quarterback. I don't rate Daniel Jones. They look terrible in preseason. Like that game that they were in, that offense stank. Like it really stank. And he's got Jason Garrett there. I mean, Jason Garrett. I mean, come on. And I just think that the Giants are in for a really, really bad season this year. There's talk about there's players retiring the second they arrive there. There's people complaining about their kit bags being pissed in, and there's fights on the training field. And Dave Gettleman's already dodging bullets, and the season hasn't even been kicked off. They've got Golladay is injured. You know what I mean? Their big free agency signing. Never mind the jump for Daniel Jones. They're in the mire. I just think that the Giants are going to be really bad this year. There's something that just doesn't smell right in New York at this moment in time. And for once, it's not the Jets who are smelling of shit. You know what I mean?
I can assure you, our mate on the other podcast, Fern and Short Tom, this was not planned. There's no agenda. These have just come straight off the back thoughts. Apologies in advance.
It wasn't planned by us three.
I wanted to bring it up, but I wanted to bring it up without any pre-warning because I know Tom's in the other chat, so I knew you'd all have something to say.
Yeah, so sorry, Tom. Happy listening. Before we move on and make some bold takes and predict the first guy to go, anyone else that you think is on the hot seat, or a potential hot seat? Mark?
Yeah, I don't think he's on the hot seat because he's got such a contract. He's got a 10-year deal. But can we just have special praise, please, for John Gruden, who's managed to go so far into this Raiders career and not actually be on the hot seat and still not have fielded a winning record, make John Gruden's job safe, one, because I think he's got something over on Mark Davis, the owner, or something like that. He must have some hidden video footage or something like that. Like Mark Davis has done what he shouldn't have done. And he was his guy. He was handpicked by Mark Davis. But honestly, I don't know any other head coach who could have, who could be going this deep into their contract. We're talking about the 4th year and have not produced a winning record. You know what I mean? He won't get fired. His contract is too long. I predict another stagnant middle of the road season for the Raiders. I said to my friends today, it'll be 8-9 or it'll be 9-8. We'll be in no man's land. The last 5 games of the season look particularly difficult, and I think they will determine the playoffs. And you know what the worst thing about that is? We're really shit in the last 4 or 5 games of the season, or at least John Gruden's recent record is. So we're asking him to go against trend. And I don't think he's on the hot seat, but he fucking should be.
Again, it wouldn't be a Third and Short Overtime podcast without Mark jumping into Gruden, dissecting an average season coming up for the Raiders, would it? But anyway, moving on. John, of all the coaches and everything like that, have you got a bold take or a prediction on the first guy who you think will go, or a prediction of a guy who will go halfway through the season?
I think mid-season firings are relatively rare, unless the arse completely falls out of a team. Of the people that we've listed, Zach Taylor strikes me as the most likely to go mid-season. If they're like 0-8 halfway through the year, something like that, I could see that being a thing. Assuming that they aren't that bad, I think Kingsbury might be the first out of the door, depending on how bad the Cardinals are. And looking at the schedule, they could be in the shit midway through the year. So keep an eye on that one too. But if it's a mid-season, I would say Zach Taylor.
Bones?
I mean, mid-season firing, I reckon Taylor or Kings. I do think Kingsbury's. Mark mentioned it earlier. I asked him when he was talking about it. I do think Kingsbury's in a spot based on everything everyone said tonight where he could end up going mid-season. I did want to say I saw the odds for Gruden getting fired mid-season were actually reasonably high, despite his 10-year contract. The bookmakers still have him in the running for people getting fired this year for some reason. I know Mark says the 10-year means he's definitely not getting fired, but I just thought it was worth bringing up that the odds aren't that bad.
Mark, anything to add? Prediction? Not Gruden.
I've really got little to add. Cliff Kingsbury's my choice. I give the reasons why earlier on, so I'm sticking with that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be quite vanilla with it and say Cliff Kingsbury as well. It's really not an agenda, guys. It's really not. It's just how we feel, and I do think that if it's not him that's the first to go, and like John said, I don't know if it'll be halfway through the season. I'm not sure. If it's not him the first to go, I think Zach Taylor will be before him. Either way, one of them two will follow each other. So that is the hot seats of the head coaches covered. Like we said, I think it were only right that after the week 1 preseason games at the weekend and some Wednesday, Thursday last week that we talked about it. Mark mentioned in the group chat that rookie quarterbacks are getting talked to death, but we can't not mention them, can we? There's some really good ones out there, and I'll throw it back to you first, Mark. Is which one really impressed you if you had to choose one out of them all, or maybe go for two if you like?
I'll pick. To be honest with you, the point that I want to make is none of them let themselves down. Trey Lance had a wow throw, and then kind of played pretty badly later on once I watched the tape back. Trevor Lawrence was kind of like Trevor Lawrence. He looked a little bit skittish, but his O-line was garbage. But he made some nice throws, and you could see Trevor Lawrence in there. I thought Zach Wilson was really very good. I thought Zach Wilson moved the ball well and played well. I think he might be the best out of the rookie quarterbacks week 1, especially when I went back and looked at the game. I thought Justin Fields looked tremendous as advertised, threw a touchdown, ran a touchdown, and Mac Jones looked very competent. Everything that was good about Mac Jones coming out, his intelligence, his quick release, just how quickly he can see a play and how he can make it. I'm not going to pick out one of them. What I'm going to see is that there's enough there for every single franchise that drafted a first-round quarterback to go, yeah, this guy's not dreadful, and we feel quite promising about it.
Yeah, I think I didn't catch every single one of them. I missed the Mac Jones ones, but like you said, I heard good things about him. I wanted to watch Justin Fields, to be honest with you, and he started off a bit slow, but once he got into the rhythm of the throwing and stuff, and really got into the game, it was brilliant. The touchdown run was something. It was just nice, the awareness of everything that were going on. And just knew to get, there's nothing on. I've gone through my reads. Let me use my legs, and that's going to be the benefit with him next season. The same with Trey Lance. These guys can use the legs. Even Zach Wilson as well. Bones, what did you like from the rookie quarterbacks?
So in the preseason, I like to isolate certain parts of games and watch that bit. Because it's the preseason stuff. It's not always the same lineup out there. And like Mark mentioned, there were plays where Lawrence's O-line was just trash. You can't look at those plays and be like, well, Lawrence sucks. It's like, well, no. He was playing with third string O-linemen. I think the one series that I really wanted to talk about was Mac Jones' 2-minute drill. They put him out there. They said, run the 2-minute offense. Go just let us see what you can do in the 2-minute drill. And he went 7 for 9 and drove them all the way down the field. I think it ended in a field goal. I don't think it ended in an actual touchdown, unfortunately. I can't remember how it ended. I forgot. It was late. But the actual throws were what I was focusing on, and the actual reads and the pass. And it's like Mark said. Mark touched on it. It was like everything we said about him coming out of college, his intelligence, his ability to run the play-action offense and be handing the ball off 1 second. And he convincingly play actions as well. That's the thing about Mac Jones. It's not like you see certain quarterbacks who just tuck the ball and sort of then take a couple of lazy steps backwards and that's my play action done. Mac Jones, you believe, has the ball for a good second, and then he turns around, he makes a quick, intelligent decision and throws to the right guy almost every time in that 2-minute drill. And he was making the calls on the field as well and made the right. It just looked really good. I was really happy to see it. I'm not even a Patriots fan, and I thought it's just really good to see. I thought that was my one big highlight from the quarterback.
Well, obviously, I have a vested interest. We talked about this last week. I think Mark hit the nail on the head. all of them would have pleased the franchises in different ways. I think Mac Jones was probably the most impressive, and you can see where that pro-ready idea of him coming into the draft has come from. He looked very comfortable running that offense. I thought Zach Wilson was good, and if I'm honest, I think he's benefiting from being the starter. He's not competing with anyone. He's not, he's in with the first string offensive line. He's getting to run the plays that are in the game plan. He's not running plays designed specifically for him. Lawrence too, I think, obviously everybody, despite the fact that Urban Meyer keeps trying to manufacture a quarterback controversy, I think everybody knows that Lawrence is going to start week one. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Touching on Lance quickly, because obviously I will, because I watched it. I think I watched it. Everybody saw the 80-yard bomb. I think it's gone back 5 yards every time somebody's talked about it. He's actually throwing for the car park now. But it was a cracking throw, and it was exactly what you wanted to see from him. I think what we also saw, though, he was throwing a lot of high-velocity sideline passes, like deep outs to the sideline. Those are not in Jimmy Garoppolo's wheelhouse in the slightest. And they are plays that Shanahan likes, so you could definitely see why we went for him. I think when you start looking at his performance on a stats-based level, you think he's had a bit of an average game, and I think he did. There was some throws he definitely would want back. I don't think there's any escaping that. He definitely airballed a couple. He's got a real zip to his passes that, frankly, I don't think some of the receivers were ready for. I counted at least 4 drops that should have been catches. They were all good throws in good spots. Richie James in particular was a massive offender for dropping the ball. And by all accounts, he's continued doing it in practice. So I hope he enjoyed his NFL career, because I think that's pretty much done with. The only other thing that makes it hard to evaluate Lance, and it's kind of the opposite of Zach Wilson, because he's going in as a second-string QB, he's getting the second-string offensive line, and to be honest with you, I could block better than some of our second-string offensive line. They were absolute garbage. So I think it makes him hard to evaluate, because there was some plays where, like 3 seconds after he's took the snap, he's getting buried, and you can't evaluate any quarterback under those circumstances. I'd like to see him get a run with the ones just to see how good he is. I think he was comfortably number 4 in terms of like who looked the best, but he had the moments that make me think, yeah, okay, I think we're going to be all right. But I would say Wilson overall. Thought he was excellent.
I've got a question for you all. If you want to answer it, you can do. If you don't, it's fine. I'll start with Mark, but I'll throw out the question anyway. I was listening. I start with Mark because I know that he listens to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, and he mentioned on the episode this week that take a lot of this with a pinch of salt when it comes to the quarterbacks. In preseason, he was saying that like head coaches of each team come over and meet over before the game and say, this is what we're going to do. Don't play cover 3, leave gaps in the middle, and things like that. What do you actually make of a preseason game as Mark? How much, like I said, how much do you take it with a pinch of salt? How much do you believe in stuff? Are you looking for certain things which will move forward into the real games where it's like he's doing that quite well?
Yeah, I'm a bit like Bones. I look for certain scenarios. I was impressed as well, Bones, with Mac Jones's 2-minute drill. He made decisions so well. And when it comes to like preseason games, that's what I look at. I want to know what are they like on 3rd down when it's 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 10. You know what I mean? How does it look then? How do they look, like when they maybe have already received pressure? And how do they look the very next play after? I do pay attention to preseason games, but I do agree. I mean, look, these kids have played like 10 snaps or something like that. Like, you're not gonna know somebody's career at this stage. But there is certain things you can look at and you can kind of see some areas. For example, with Trey Lance, I was a Trey Lance fan. I still am a Trey Lance fan. When I look at his inaccuracy at the end of that game, I know some of those balls were dropped, but some of them just weren't uncatchable because he was slinging them, like a rifle, like from 6 yards, NFL receivers shouldn't be catching them, but God, take some of the mustard off the ball tray. Throw it for a little bit better touch in those scenarios. And that's, when I look at that, I'm not too worried, John, because I know that kid's played 1 game since 2019, and I know that touch will come back, and he'll know when to put the 90-mile-per-hour fastball and drilling in on them sideline throws. And when he just needs to take a little bit of mustard off it because he's giving it to Ayuk across the middle on a crosser, I think I'm not too worried about that stuff. So, yeah, the preseason doesn't mean a lot. But a contradiction to that is there is some things that you want to see confirmed in the preseason, Jordan,
I think Mark brought up a couple of good points there, like in terms of like, obviously I said it. You look for things in isolation in the preseason. I think even if head coaches are going and having these conversations beforehand, where they're saying, "Don't run this kind of defense against us," you hear it all the time. There are situations you cannot replicate in practice, and sometimes asking the opponent, like, fine, they might ask them that, but that is still so that they can replicate situations that they cannot do in practice, and they can try out things that we've not had a chance to see. Like the preseason is, in essence, to me, like extended practice. Like it's practice 2.0. It's you should still. The preseason doesn't count, but it does matter. That's what all the pundits say, isn't it? The preseason doesn't count, but it does matter. And like for 30 odd dudes, it's the difference between a job and going and working in insurance. Do you know what I mean? Like the preseason is interesting for many reasons. Yes, there may be some behind the scenes stuff and it may not be real, like serious plays a lot of the time, but you're still looking for things. Like the head coaches themselves are still basically doing interviews and auditions, whatever you want to call it, the whole preseason. And that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think what I'm looking for when it comes to preseason, and it's a bit like other sports as well, when you throw it, especially with rookies, when you throw somebody into the game, you're not necessarily looking for them to take over straight away. It's great if they do, but most of what you're trying to evaluate is, do they actually look like they belong on an NFL team? Do they look like they belong on an NFL field? Are they running the right assignments? Are they getting blown up? Take an example. We talked about Trey Lance. Obviously, the touch was missing on some throws, but there was enough that I watched that went, yeah, he can play in the NFL. He's going to be an NFL QB. And I think that's what you're evaluating. You're evaluating who can do certain jobs, who can play special teams, even things like that. People. It's the scores don't matter, but your play certainly does. It's kind of what Bones said. The scores don't matter, but how you show up on film and the film you put in, not just for the team you're at, but the team you might be going to. If you do get cut, you may land somewhere else. It's important to put the right stuff on film for teams. And I think that's the main thing you're looking for. You're just looking for somebody that looks like they know they're in the NFL and know how to play in the NFL. And there are some that definitely don't look like they know how to play in the NFL.
With all that being said, we're going to move on to some players that looked good, or teams that look good, or players that look bad and good over this preseason. So, other than quarterbacks, obviously, that we've touched on. So, Mark, I know that you're going to speak about at least one guy that I really liked in preseason.
Yeah, but I'm going to talk about my two favourite defensive players in the NFL draft. Both of them have come out and both of them have just looked tremendous, which is not new to me. Patrick Surtain had a pick six in the Denver Broncos uniform. Looked absolutely brilliant. You can tell he's well coached. We talked about the weapons that they've got. They've got Fuller, they've got I can't remember the name of the other guy. They've got a really good slot receiver there. Anyway, his name escapes us at the moment. But Patrick Surtain looked absolutely tremendous on his NFL debut. And it wasn't his NFL debut for the next guy, but Micah Parsons again just looks an absolute freak of nature. He's playing Mike for Dallas. I kind of thought he would have played the overhang linebacker, which would have rushed the passer, but he already looks more mobile than Jalen Smith, who had that injury coming into the NFL. And you've got to think how long that's going to derail his career, folks. I don't think Jalen Smith's going to play much, like with Micah Parsons on the field in that Mike position. I think he might be the spare wheel in that linebacker room. But yeah, Micah Parsons was just around the ball, phenomenal. And Patrick Surtain, best two defensive players in the draft. I'd said that from the start. And certainly on first impressions, they look like they are going to have very, very good NFL careers.
It's funny you should mention Jalen Smith because I think, like you said, I think he might get pushed out. I don't know if they'll use him as some trade or something at the end of this because he's really looking on the edge, looking in. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on that. But yeah, Micah Parsons, that first episode of Hard Knocks, if anyone's watched it, where he's trying to get one more play and try to pull him out, saying, "No, you've done enough today, son." He's still trying to get out there one more play. That just sums up Micah Parsons. If you've seen him in college, he's going to be such a beast going forward. I'll just throw mine in real quick while you're on defensive players. I saw a little bit of a JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He looked good. I think he got himself a sack, and he just looked so fast getting towards the ball, a bit different to Micah Parsons, and I think they're going to really utilize him at Cleveland. I don't think he will like a standout player compared to the other two, but he still looked really, really good. Bones, did you see any players you liked over this weekend?
Well, you jumped in and stole mine right there, because I was going to bring up JOK. I thought JOK had a really good first outing. Like he did what he was drafted to do, and that's all you can ask of a rookie, really. I think is when they come in and do what they asked to do. Someone I did want to bring up that I think is funny, because it's one of those guys. Do you know who didn't play as bad as he could have done? Alex Leatherwood. For all the everything that happened, he didn't have a bad first NFL game. He did all right. And I know he's taken some hits on this show, so I did want to just bring him up and give a bit of a boost back to Leatherwood after all the.
Yeah, on Alex Leatherwood, he did what we expected. He was very good in the run game. There was some bits in pass protection where he needed to work on, and that's what we expected. Before coming out as a senior in Alabama, it wasn't my problem that he wasn't a good player. It was, I think, his ceiling is his ceiling. I think he is what he is now because he's been so well coached and is a senior. It was a senior coming out of Alabama. I question how much better he can get with NFL coaching, because he gets NFL coaching in Bama. But yeah, he was excellent in the run game, created some lanes, did look really good, like the real deal in the run game. His pass blocking reps. There was some moments, but I wouldn't say he was bad. I would have said he took his dints, but he also gives some as well. I was quite impressed with Alex Leatherwood.
John, anyone that stand out to you?
I mean, a large part, some of them it's highlight plays, because I watch preseason, but I tend to watch it in bursts. Ramondre Stevenson, I think everybody saw that play. He's fighting to make that roster, and I think he did a pretty good job. But away from the other flash play was Joe Tryon, obviously for the Bucs. How the hell he got flagged for that? One of the cleanest sacks I've seen in years. I honestly don't know, but I thought he played well. We didn't necessarily know what role he might have in Tampa Bay when they drafted him, but I think if he can produce that on a regular basis, they'll not be sad about that. One guy I wanted to mention, I don't think anybody else has, and it's kind of a position that to an extent gets overlooked. Obviously, Bones has just mentioned Leatherwood, but that's another term short name. Sam Cosmi in Washington, I thought played really well. He was in for a lot of the game. He was playing against mostly the first string Patriots defense. I thought he held up really well. They desperately need something on that line, really, certainly at the tackle position. So I think they'll be happy with the early returns on him, that's for sure.
Oh, I did have one more quickly, just while we're on the subject still. In the Detroit versus Buffalo game, Bills Lions, we had Gregory Rousseau versus Penei Sewell in a couple of sets. You got to see the rookie match off between those two, and Sewell got beat a couple of times, but he looked all right. He looked good in the run game, but there's improvements to be made in places. But I don't think all of it was his fault. But anyway, I just wanted to bring it up quickly because we mentioned Rousseau when we did the big draft preview as well.
Yeah. I know Mark's got another guy he wants to mention real quickly, but I've seen James Davis has typed in that Jevon Holland has been outstanding for the Dolphins. I'm going to be honest with you. I'll throw my hands up. I didn't see the Dolphins game. I don't know if any of you guys did.
I did. I watched a little bit of it.
Did you see anything of Holland?
I didn't. That stood out, but I haven't been paying attention to a training camp. But many years will remember, I was a Holland fan, and I had him going in the first round to the Jags. Remember, with their second pick, Jordan, in my last mock draft. Yeah. I was a Holland fan. I think he's got that nickel, potential for safety. One of them safeties who can play free safety and cover the nickel. He's an Oakland native. He was from Oakland. And then I was kind of hoping that the Raiders might have picked him up. But yeah, it doesn't surprise us that he's doing well, because I thought he was a really polished player coming out. And I kind of thought that I thought he might have had back end of the first round potential. I thought he might have sneaked into the back end of the first round. And the player who I do want to bring up, though, just because anybody who knows me, And anybody who was watching me in the whole draft process would have heard me just talk about how much he loved Rondale Moore. But Rondale Moore had a good game. He looked very good. He looked like the 2018-2019 version of Rondale Moore. Like a Purdue who wasn't injured, as opposed to the 2020 version. And I think he's such an exciting player. I'm really looking forward to seeing him. And I'm looking forward to seeing Elijah Moore in the next preseason game. I don't think he played a single snap. But I'm looking forward to seeing Rondale Moore, more of him, and some of Elijah Moore moving forward.
Yeah, I think some really it was such a good draft this year, and I think there's some really talented players that we're going to all keep an eye on going into the new season. Obviously, we've talked about the good. We've got to talk about the bad. The one game that I watched where I think I was laughing through most of it. I was just watching the Atlanta Falcons play, and there was just both quarterbacks. I think it was it's McCarron, but I always forget his first name. Is it AJ? It's AJ, and AJ McCarron.
Yeah, AJ.
You just need to go back and watch that, because I know he's not ever going to challenge for the first, but it was like a battle between him and Philip Franks for obviously the number 2, and I think they managed. I think they managed about 40, 50 yards passing between them on 21 attempts. So Philip Franks did show something. He showed something with his legs. I think he put up 70 yards rushing by himself with his legs. So he did show something, Philip Franks. But AJ McCarron, Jesus, it was embarrassing, really. And the offensive line, the seconds for Falcons, I feel for the Falcons if they do get a lot of injuries, because it would be a long season for them. And I know Jalen Mayfield struggled. He don't look like he's anywhere near ready for the first team yet. But it's only week 1. We'll see what goes on next. But yeah, it were bad watching the Falcons. JP, bad? Anyone bad that you saw, team player?
So a lot of bad second-string offensive lines. You kind of touched on it with the Falcons there. Ours was horrendous. I saw a few others that weren't great. The Dolphins' first-string offensive line wasn't great. I think James has referenced that in the chat. They're going to have to fix that quickly if they want to get something out of Tua. There was a lot. The Giants' offense, you touched on that. I'm surprised. I thought you were going to say you were laughing through that one, to be honest with you. But there was a lot of. And I'm just going to touch on a very quick one. Josh Rosen, who was competing for our third string, possibly backup, depending on what happens with Garoppolo. We've now cut him. He was that bad. He's now out of the league. Top 10 pick, 3 years ago, I think. And now he's unclaimed on waivers and can currently be signed off the street. So I think he had a very bad week. Said he wasn't getting enough reps in practice, but if what I saw in the game is any indication, that's probably why.
Mark, I'm sure you'll definitely have one, won't you, or two?
Yeah, Nick Mullins was really particularly bad. He had a really bad start line. Do you know what it is, though, right? A lot of this is early in the season as well, you know what I mean? But Nick Mullins was particularly bad start line. And on your lines, you know what it is? This is second string or lines, and you're going to see some warts. Not, this is where you want to see somebody step up, though, because you want to think, can he play a swing tackle? Can he be a backup guard for us? You know what I mean? Quentin Munez, the guy who he was very good. He was excellent in guard and he was excellent in center. He played 2 positions, but the offensive lines, really, you just want one person or 2 of them second string has to stand out, and you can go, right, okay, there's our swing tackle or there's our backup guard, for example. But yeah, Nick Mullins would be my choice. He had a really, really rough night,
Yeah, it's like you mentioned with the old lines. You just want if you can find 1 or 2, coming out of there, that can be good backups, then you're doing all right. And then hopefully you don't have to use the rest of them when it comes to the rest of the season. Hopefully they stay fit. But you know how you see it so many times, how many old linemen can go down through the season. You are going to have to rotate, and hopefully you've got a few good ones at least that can fill in for a few games. And this is what this preseason is about: seeing if you've got a few guys there that can at least do a job for a few games. Bones, did you see anyone that you? I know you watched the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, bad. Bad. I mean, they're not necessarily a rookie, but I mean, Mark's prophecy about Tim Tebow was proven correct. Like, the guy was like laughably bad on the field. I'm sure we've all seen the clip where he fell over, and we've all seen the clip of him running aimlessly around the midfield. Like, was that throw to me? No, wait, that throw was to that guy. What am I doing here again? Like, yeah, so he's out the league now. He's gone. So I thought that was funny to bring up because that was one of the funnier things about the Jacksonville game was just watching Tebow fumble around the field like a buffoon. But credit to him, he came back in the league at 36 at playing tight end or something. Like, what?
Some of them videos were comical. Well, that one where he was on the right hand side of the I think it was the guard one, and he went into block, missed the guy, went back to find him again, and then ran into his own guy. It's just you just can't write stuff like that, can you? It's just going to be around forever. It's just a meme for everything, isn't there?
Does anybody remember Ali Dyer? Who used to? So Ali Dyer was the guy who convinced Graham Souness he was Georgie Weah's cousin. And Graham Souness signed him on the back of this guy, Ali Dyer, who said, "I'm George Weah's cousin." And he came on and just looked massively out of place on a football field. And Souness subbed him 9 minutes later. That's Tim Tebow at tight end. You know what I mean? Tim Tebow's phoned, Urban Meyer, I can play tight end. Watch stickers out there. I can do it. And lo and behold, he can't. But you want to know, I heard something ridiculous the other day. Tim Tebow shirts have been the highest selling shirt sale in American football of the last month or two. That must be a record, mustn't it, for a player who's never even going to start for the franchise for the record amount of shirts being sold. How ridiculous is that? That's got to top the Antonio Brown one for the Raiders, hasn't it?
Yeah, and at least Brown had played in the league to some sort of standard before that. Like, Tebow basically had half a good season. Like, the cult that follows him around is insane to me. Like, it's just at the end of the day, we said when they signed him, it's there for publicity. It's there to sell jerseys, sell tickets. It's done its job now. That's it. It's over. Hopefully.
Yeah. Hopefully you're right there, John. Hopefully it is over. Well, yeah.
Do you want to know where Ali Dyer ended up anyway? By the way, so if you remember the Ali Dyer story, he ended up playing for Gateshead. Just across the water, non-league team Gateshead, and ended his career playing for Gateshead. Can you believe it? We are Georgie Weah's cousin.
That's a great reference. I absolutely love that.
If we have any American viewers that watch us, that's a soccer reference, an English soccer reference. So I'd go read the story if I were you. It's funny you say that. I think Arsenal had George Weah's cousin, Christopher Weah, and he didn't do much either, to be honest with you. So I think he lasted about 3 or 4 games. Anyway, I've really enjoyed this episode tonight. It's been brilliant, dissecting, the week one a little bit and looking at the coaches on the hot seat. It'll be interesting to see over the season, especially the coaches where we were right or wrong on some of our takes. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what we've got planned for the episode next week, but we will be here at 7:30. We're kind of getting there, used to it now. We get the days right. We just need to get there for 7:30, don't we? And then we've cracked it, haven't we? But thank you all for listening. Thank you guys for everything. It's been good, and we'll see you next week.